how do you guys define good code? It compiles. All right, there we go. I like it. Anyone else? When you're going through this example right now, what defines good code for you? Short, elegant. All right. Derek?
Easy to extend, reuse.
Cool. All right. Reuse, extend, short, elegant. It works. All great answers. So before I move forward, I just really like this picture just because it's really funny. If you've ever had to evaluate someone else's code, the what the fucks per minute. Anyway, sorry. It just always makes me laugh. But yeah, so I think everyone kind of hit the nail on the head that the sort of loose approximation for good code is in that reusability. It's how long can you use that block of code? Because if you can use that block of code across multiple projects, across years of work, that is good. If you're constantly having to, iterate on that or change it, it's not good code. And so I guess before kind of actually jumping into the sort of libraries, I think the other interesting thing or, important thing to note is there are a lot of just devices out there. If you look at Android, iPhone, tablets, desktops, you've got, 600 million or so devices in the United States, like just in the United States, about 600 million devices across those things. If you're going through a project and you're specifically, only working with iOS or, only writing in Swift or Java or only doing a desktop thing, you're literally missing out on hundreds of millions of devices. And that's not even including like international. I mean, if you go to like India or China, you've got hundreds of millions of more devices, right there. And so I think it's really important, like if you're a startup, if you're a young company, to get like kind of as many people on your platform as possible. Like that's what you're looking for. And so you can't like exclude anything. So we're looking for something that is both good code, something that can be reused across everything, and that can hit all these different platforms. So what is the solution? Oh, and you also have a small developer team, yeah. So what is the solution? It's JavaScript. You guys were all supposed to say, ooh. Thank you. There we go. So the reason why I kind of say that JavaScript is the solution is really because of the browser. So if you kind of like look at all the devices that I just mentioned, the one thing that is consistent across all of them is the browser. And so the browser is this like magical little thing that no matter what you sort of put into it, you can display what you want, and it works across everything. Most people sort of know about this through sort of responsive design on, websites, but there are several technologies which, we're kind of going to go through. Oh, just another funny picture. There are, several technologies, primarily Ionic and Electron, which allow you to basically take a web-based technology and put it onto a browser or onto a mobile or a desktop machine. And so I guess just to, sort of move into the technical details a little bit more. So Ionic is actually built on another technology called Cordova, and Electron is actually built off of another tool called Chromium and Node.js. Just as kind of a cool note. So the way that I guess sort of Ionic and Cordova work, and so this again is kind of the mobile-specific one. So basically what you would do is you would create your sort of same web application, sort of that's kind of what's this blue in the top left corner. So that's just a traditional sort of web application that you would normally build. Ionic has like some additional things, but at the end of the day, it's really just a responsive web. And then Ionic has basically put Cordova as kind of the wrapper around that, and it's kind of created some nifty little APIs to help you more easily pull that stuff in. And now the great thing about that is even though you're building a website essentially, you can access all of the native plugins, all the native device characteristics. So if you still need to pull like the camera, the accelerometer, device info, UUIDs, advertising information, you can do all of that in exactly the same way. So even though you're building a website using the same web technologies that you're familiar with from building your website, you can still build a mobile-specific application. So this is kind of, a little bit more technical about how that works. Are there any questions on this? Sweet. Nope. So that is the great thing about Ionic is like if you don't want to write a single line of Objective-C, of Swift, of any of that stuff, if you don't want to pull up Xcode, you don't have to. You can, like if you're writing custom plugins, you might need to jump in there, but for the most part, they've done a really good job at sort of isolating all those components, so you don't have to do any of that work anymore. And that's I guess kind of the great thing about it is you really can, and I'll walk through kind of a really simple example about how you can actually build, an Ionic, how you can build a full mobile application, pull that in without running a single line of code. Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone on the phone or on call? Cool. So the other one that I kind of wanted to mention as well, so we just kind of talked about mobile stuff. So there's also the other side, which is the desktop. So in the same way that sort of Ionic is built off of Cordova, which is basically creating this like little website for you, Electron is built off of Chromium, which is sort of the bare bones version of Chrome. And it allows you to basically create a desktop wrapper for your website as well. And so what's actually kind of happening within that is it's actually using Node.js to basically interact with like sort of the C++. And then you can sort of have all of your different renderers. And so the nice thing about using this again is with just using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can create a native desktop application that someone can install, which is really, really nifty. So, often people kind of use, different sort of design practices between these different devices, but if you wanted to, you could literally reuse the exact same responsive code, between all of these different platforms, like for the most part. There might be a little bit, but you really can build for all these devices with, 80% of the same code base, which is fantastic. Any questions on this one? Okay, cool. So I guess now what I wanted to do was actually sort of move into a little bit more technical portion of it. So quickly got through kind of the overview. So let's actually kind of move into some code and kind of see how they work. Someone fine, Derek? Sweet. Derek has a thumbs up. So I guess kind of before we get started, I just wanted to like show that there's a ton of different examples of applications using Ionic specifically. So one of the examples that I'm actually bringing up right now is this was actually the mobile application that Elson or then Samurai had actually submitted to the Apple Store. So you can come see all of the code, exactly how we kind of like set it up, right here. So I guess, do you guys want me to walk through some of that code, or do you think it'd be more interesting to just like start something new and actually build a new little UI?
Yeah.
Something new? Cool. All right. So Angular, yeah. So I guess the place to actually get started is just ionic.io. So ionic.io, just remember that URL. It's also the last page of the slide. So one of the things that I actually wanted to sort of show off in this demo is some of the new cool stuff that Ionic has kind of done to make these processes even easier. So one of the new ones that I really like is this Ionic Creator. And so the nice thing about Ionic Creator is it's basically just a drag and drop interface for creating sort of the framework for your mobile application. So it won't do like all of the underlying guts for it, but it'll do all the pretty safe stuff. And at least I know on our team, so we've got sort of the backend developer, front-end developer, and then like the designer. The designer can do this all themselves, and you don't have to iterate with them, which always really sucks. So that's really nice. Because you can make them do all their fucking work. Okay. So anyway, sorry, am I not supposed to first chat? So I just logged into, I think, my account. So I just created this, really simple sort of sandbox demo project. just kind of for this example. And so what we can basically do is on the left, you kind of have the different sort of pages within the application. Down below are sort of the components that Ionic has sort of made pre-baked into here. So we can kind of just go add a page. So we'll just start with like a new blank one. On the sort of right here, we have, additional sort of things like if you want to hide portions of the page, or you can just kind of start dragging in different elements. So, basically like what if we wanted a image on the top, and then we wanted a button down below, or you wanted to add sort of a spacer in between those two things. So what's great is, it's incredibly straightforward to just kind of drag these items in, respace, resize them, add sort of the basic links to either other pages, add text to something, modify the theme to, all of those.
What happens if you switch devices?
Yeah. So up here on the top, they basically have kind of the default devices, right? So if you want to switch to an Android phone, you can also just kind of remove the skin.
Okay.
Yeah. So the cool thing, so I think it's actually important. I like seeing the skin. It's helpful to me. But you can also see what it looks like on, tablet devices as well. And again, to reiterate, like the great thing about this is we're essentially just creating a responsive website. There's like a couple of little nuances that we need to think about for mobile specific and tablet specific, but anything that you can do on a responsive website, that's really what we're doing. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the cool thing about it. Does that answer your question? Sweet. Cool. Oh, and you can also rotate the device. Everyone needs to know how it looks rotated. So let's just rotate that back. So now I guess we can continue sort of, making links to all the different things, continuing dragging things in. We can drop in a video, to some YouTube link. We can also sort of create our own custom forms, drag in all the sort of elements that we want, connect sort of the names, how those things are all working. And now what's cool is we can just click on this little preview icon. And so now all it did was it basically took that, visual interface, it turned it into sort of the HTML, JavaScript, and corresponding CSS, and it just rendered that for us. And so we can actually sort of play with the phone play with the device right here, interact kind of exactly how a user would sort of feel how they would feel the application if they were looking at it on their phone, which is, pretty darn cool. And then if we notice something that we want differently, we can, come back, make that modification. Like we realized we actually wanted to remove the header or something. Do whatever we want. Yeah, which is cool. So this is kind of, I guess, the bare bones version, and we can walk through like how to create more elements and how to go through that stuff. But so let's say we kind of started constructing this application, and we now wanted to actually, I guess, pull the code down, not off of this Ionic thing, and actually put it on our device, right? Actually run it like on our computer or start really, doing something more serious with it. So basically, all I did was I went over to the Ionic documentation. So I guess, actually, before I get to that, one of the things that Ionic has actually just released, I think it was like a couple of months ago, was they launched sort of the ability to actually share the application. So you can, either just like send it to someone, or you can also download it directly as sorry, I was just writing things. Or you can also directly download it to your phone. So those are some of the like paid features that they have, right? So that's how you would actually be able to directly, without actually pulling it down, writing any additional code, ever going into the CLI, take that GUI and put it in there, which is a really cool feature, I think. Of course, I'm a startup, or I work at a startup, so we don't have $24 to spare. That's obviously spent on Red Bull. So we're gonna do the CLI. So that's what makes sense. Right, everyone? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to figure out where my terminal is. Oh, okay. Okay. So I'm in my Ionic folder on my computer, right? So I'm in my dev folder, pulling it down. So one of the things I can do is I can sort of just drop, hit the download button. The first tab that they have is for the Ionic CLI. I've already installed Cordova, and I've already installed Cordova and Ionic. If you need to do that, it's pretty easy going through the documentation. It's like 2 lines of code. And then we can basically just pull this line to actually pull down the sort of like web file, which will allow us to start building and doing all the stuff locally. And so conveniently, I already have that typed in. You guys got to work with me a little bit here. So I don't know what that is. So I'm just overwriting my existing one, pulling down that file. So now it's basically initializing the Cordova project. So the sort of diagram that I showed earlier. So now basically what Ionic is doing is it basically has those APIs which are creating the entire wrapper for us. So this is kind of one of the like cool things that Ionic has done is they've ended up like creating the API to build the wrapper around itself, as well as all the sort of folders that you need to do, Android devices, Windows devices, like, what's the like Palm Pilot thing? You could still do that one. I think there's like 8 people still using it, which is really cool. So it does all that stuff for you. So you don't even have to like worry about that. And you can also install and run any of the Cordova plugins from Ionic as well. So really, like, if you never want to go to the Cordova website, even though it's really pretty, you don't have to. Cool. All right. So sweet. Good work, guys. We installed it. So we can now have this sandbox demo folder. Cool. So we can now jump into that. And now all we have to do is do Ionic serve. And so what Ionic serve is basically going to do is that will generate sort of a local, it'll basically spin up its own local server. I think it just uses like HTTP server or something. So that way we can run all this stuff locally. And one of the nifty features that they actually added inside the Ionic CLI was the ability to like automatically rebuild that. I don't know what that is. So it'll automatically rerun itself. So you can either do one, sort of just the serving of it to your sort of local browser like this, which in all fairness, most of the time this is like more than sufficient. You don't really need much more than this because remember, like the web browser on your phone isn't that different than the web browser on your computer. So like 99.8% of the time, you'll be fine. And it's a lot faster building like this. Or, 2, you can also, via the Ionic CLI, emulate it to your device or build it directly to your device as well. It just takes a couple of minutes, and I'm usually too impatient for that. And so, yeah, that's kind of the cool thing about it. So, again, you can sort of build, you can either serve it to the local server, emulate it to sort of the either Android emulator or the iOS emulator, or build it to your actual device. As a note, and just as a heads up, if you haven't ever like deployed a device, Apple, mainly Apple, it just kind of sucks. It's just kind of a pain in the ass. So there's a couple of like places or a couple of people that have done like really good documentation about how to publish to Apple, but it just sucks. Just overall, you also have to pay for it. Like there's no way getting around that. Yeah. So if you don't have to, don't. Yeah. Anyway, so that's, I guess, kind of the nice thing about sort of using Ionic is it does like most of that work for you. So again, now that we kind of talked about all that, so now when we actually look at our local page, this is what we're seeing. It's going to bring up the mobile app. We can sort of click on it, experience it exactly how a user would. We can type in, we can do all this sort of form validation, all those different things, exactly like we would on the other page. And so any of those changes that we just made to that web application, to that GUI, it took us 30 seconds to basically pull down the latest copy and get it going, which is pretty solid. And I guess the other nice thing is, like, if you're familiar with web technology, it's super easy to then use the exact same debugging tools, go into everything, see exactly how things are working, reuse modules across applications, which is really, really convenient. And so I wanted to actually just bring up and just as a heads up, I'm using Atom, which, if you're unfamiliar, is also built off of Chrome. Again, you guys are just like, ooh, at that point. So this is basically like what we're looking at here, this sandbox demo folder. This is that entire project that it created for us. So it basically creates all the controllers that we need. It creates sort of the blank directives. It sets up all the state provider for you. It gives you sort of the blank services. It pulls in all the files exactly as you want it to. So pretty much at this point, if we felt comfortable, we could deploy this and send it to Apple. And I know one of the questions that I get asked all the time is like, oh, well, can you actually deploy this and send it to Apple? Yes, you can. The project that I have here, that Samurai GUI Mobile, so this has 4 versions that were all approved by Apple. You can see, all the different ones that we had. I think I kind of included how we organize our folders and how we kind of submitted it, just to kind of keep it organized. And if you still don't believe me, because some people don't, I have proof, because I can log in and we can show you. My app expired. Right? So I've got proof, guys. But yeah, so that's kind of the great thing about it is it's very straightforward to build directly from the Ionic, build the binary from the Ionic platform and automatically update that. So it's very, very straightforward, which is cool. And I included a good link for if you're ever trying to figure out how to publish to that. Okay. How do you guys feel about Ionic?
Resources.
Do you guys want to learn more about Ionic, or what do you want to?
When do you actually you so far we've done everything with really writing case, right?
Yeah.
What is an example of the case where you actually would have to dig in a little bit more?
So I'll bring up sort of the Samurai application. So I guess this application was sort of broken into a couple of different pieces. So the 4 main views were sort of a portfolio. Then we had kind of a notification page, a trading page, and an activity page. It's my eyes, dude. Thank you. I can't read it. Oh, sorry, I forgot you guys can see that. It is good for the eyes, though. So I guess looking back at what we were kind of given from this gave us kind of those raw controllers. So looking at sort of the controllers over this one, we would basically kind of start writing this code into here. So I think hopefully one good one. Okay, so this was our portfolio page. So basically we had sort of one, actually let me just bring up the page. Where's the activity? Yeah, we'll bring up the activity. That one's even easier. So this was the sort of activity view for that application, right? So this is what the kind of design and what it looks like. Everyone can see that okay? Did Flex just turn back off? Sorry. So here's our activity controller. So we kind of started off by just doing some like localytics. We had localytics baked into this. So this is sort of post-authorization and authentication. And I shouldn't have that. Think about that. So basically what this sort of page allowed you to do was allow a user to sort of figure out what the latest activity on their account was based off of sort of the recent activity that they had. So we would call the server, make a call for sort of this activity object. So before we would actually like try to see if it was already stored in the cache. So we were just using the window local storage, so something really straightforward. If that window local storage was available, they would basically turn that into the activity, which would be that JSON object. Otherwise, it would go and make the call to the activity service. And that service was all available here in sort of the services file. So again, this was like a pretty simple application. So we really only had one service file, one controller file. That was it, right? So we were using sort of a combination of Q and HTTP to actually make the call. So we would make the call to basically pull the latest activity information for that user. We would clean that up and put it into sort of a set of companies as well as a set of notifications, because we needed to lump notifications together based off the company. So that's where there's kind of this like weird sorting function that we have up above that's like trying to do this complex sort. And then at that point, once we have that data available, we just need to actually do a couple of like simple calculations to get the percent changes, and that's it. If we look at the HTML starting with the view, sort of on the activity, so this is a really straightforward one where really all we have is this ng repeat that's actually doing all the work. So this one sort of line of code is basically what's generating, all of that list. We're using kind of some of the default Ionic buttons and default HTML stuff. So from that generated thing that we were just looking at, you would have something really similar to this. And actually something really similar to this Ionic content. So it was really just this, at least on this page, this like one line of custom code, which is really cool. Yeah. And that's actually like kind of all you would need to do specifically for like this one page. But you can see like we were able to like bake in localytics. We were able to set up all the same like Angular stuff that we had, and Ionic did kind of all the rest of the stuff around it. And I should note, like, so our SAS file that we were using for this application was the same as the web application as well. So we were able to reuse pretty much all of our SAS or CSS. So between both the web application and the desktop, or the web application and the mobile application. Does that sort of answer your question? Cool. I don't know if I went into too much detail. But again, the nice thing is, so all of this code is available. It's on the, it's all available on GitHub under the else and trading thing. So you can go and see exactly how we set it up. And one of the nifty things is we set up all of the authorization for all the third-party authentication and authorization for like Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Tradier. So that's all in that mobile application as well. So it's pretty straightforward to kind of see how we structured those things. Yeah, but do you guys want to learn more about Ionic? I've been talking about it for a long time.
So, give me the code and go back to the there, pull it back down, overwrite locally?
Yeah, so at least the way that I was doing it, which was just like the pulling of the raw thing. But if you do like the actual download, you can just kind of paste in the right files. That's usually the way that I do it, which is pretty straightforward. Yeah, there also is, because they've been adding a bunch of like new tools for helping you kind of like keep that stuff without it getting confused. So I would just go and play around with the Ionic Creator, because it's pretty straightforward to do those things. You can like set up the package and move the files for it. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Do you guys feel like you like Ionic yet?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So again, I guess I think the next slide is. Oops. Yeah. So I guess kind of to summarize Ionic as a whole, I think the two and I didn't really show it, but Ionic has like a bunch of like pre-built elements. So the first sort of best pro that I can always think of for Ionic specifically is if you're a small development team, like a couple of people, it drastically reduces the complexity of your code base. The reason why I say that is even if you're not like reusing all the same elements, having one developer who knows JavaScript can deal with all this shit, right? So, and especially if you decide to use like Node for doing your API as well, so that you'll have one developer who can actually be like leading your Node, dealing with kind of the Angular on the web application as well as dealing with Ionic. So, like the application that we were kind of just looking at in the code that you saw, like I was able to do that by myself in 3.5, 4 weeks while managing our web application as well. Right. So very small code or very small team, which is really, really convenient. And you can deploy that to all these different devices, right? Which is something that if you know a developer who can do, Swift, Java, whatever other things, while managing like the API and all that stuff in like 3 weeks, then please let me know so I can hire them. The other nice thing is like Ionic has been doing a lot of really good work to make these things a lot simpler for you. Like that creator, they have a bunch of other like visual tools for non-technical people to like help out, which I think is really, really helpful. Really, really helpful. The couple of cons that I would have is like there was one example where we were doing this like really weird video. I was doing consulting work for this firm that was doing like video stuff, and it took like 2 weeks to like figure out the correct way of like storing the video, putting it down into like chunks and sending it. Like there's a couple of very heavy, very specific things that Ionic doesn't do as well yet. Maybe it's improved over the last year, but basically anything short of like a very heavy game or like very heavy video usage, you can get away with in Ionic. And I think, especially if you're doing the alpha or beta of your product, you can 100% get away with it. If you have the resources to hire 10 people to go and work on one mobile app, I would do it. But we don't have those resources. If you do, again, give me a call. That'd be great. Yeah, so those are kind of the couple of like cons that I would have for Ionic. All right, so sort of already going like near the end of the time, so I'm just going to quickly go through Electron. Plus, personally, I think that Ionic is a little bit more useful just for a lot of startups. So as we were kind of just talking about for Ionic, Electron is basically the desktop equivalent of that. So if you wanted to create a desktop application, again, using Node, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, Electron is going to be your best friend. And I don't know, have you guys ever heard of this company called Slack? Yeah, so that's all Electron, right? Like that's the exact same code for their desktop is the exact same code for their website. Like they've got, I think like not a billion, like they've got like hundreds of millions of users at this point, and they're still using the exact same thing. Atom is another really good example. Spotify, like there are some really strong examples of companies using this, and that's because like Node, Node has gotten to the point where it can handle those performance things, and you can utilize a lot of the resources. Because I think one of the things that you always need to remember is like phones are fucking awesome these days. Like computers are so powerful. Like this computer I think is like weighs -pounds. It's fantastic. Yet it has like all the RAM that I'll ever need. like computers and like mobile devices can handle most of these heavy processes now without you having to really do a whole lot of work. And so that's kind of like one of the great things about sort of these two new technologies. So again, I think kind of the cons for Electron are very similar to the cons for Ionic, which is for some of those very, very heavy applications, you might get into some trouble. But I mean, I have friends who are building, very production level. I mean, Slack has a lot of users. I mean, I think I've got like 14 Slack channels or not 14 Slack groups and stupid things. Lots of.
Sorry, can you explain? I have a question. Can you explain what you mean by heavy? Like, in what way do you mean heavy?
Yeah. So the question, if you didn't hear it, was what do I mean by heavy? So I think the place where most of these still kind of get a little bit messed up is when they're doing a lot of like video or graphing stuff. Those are kind of the area where I think using the web technologies are still a little bit weaker. So like mobile specifically, if you're doing a lot of like videos, loading a lot of videos or allowing people to like do complex like math or video games, you need to do it sort of natively. And I think you still see that. Sorry? No, go for
so
it.
Heavy meaning loading lots of video. Is it because you're loading giant files? So could giant data files also cause it to be heavy?
Yeah, I mean, so on Electron specifically, you can create like multiple threads. Well, I mean, you can do it on the mobile side as well. You can create multiple threads to be able to do that. But it's still just kind of like one of the limitations of websites, though. Like if you think about what are the typical limits that like a website has, those are similar to the limits that Electron and Ionic have. Like they've tried to do things to alleviate those concerns, but they're still there. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still just opening up a web page. Like you're not changing the world. You're not like it's cool, but you're not changing the world yet. And so, yeah, like I wouldn't create like a video game in it. Maybe like Snake. But yeah, so that's kind of what I mean by heavy.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, or even like I don't know if you've ever used like Atom. Like sometimes if you try to like parse like a couple 100,000 lines of code, it gets confused. So same thing on a website. So I think these are like these are really the only necessary sources that I think. One, just Ionic.io. They actually have. To be fair, they have, I think, one of the best documentation like any libraries or frameworks I've ever used. It's just so pretty. And they have they have a really good, very active forum as well. Electron, like especially if you go to their GitHub, they've done a really good job at organizing a lot of those projects. And there's a lot of really good videos. And then people always ask me this because it just sucks. It's really just Apple that sucks. How do you publish to Apple? And this is one of the pages that I really like because it has screenshots for everything. And I know even though I've done this, enough times at this point, like I still just go through the screenshots. Because like if you miss like one little checkbox, Apple like freaks out and then it takes like 9 years for your app to get approved. All right, that's an exaggeration. It's like 3 weeks. Those I think are kind of the three main sources that I would kind of keep in mind. So I think that's actually the last slide. So I know I spent a lot more time on the Ionic side than the Electron side, but are there any sort of like wrap-up questions? Is there anything that you guys want to like learn more about, or I could send afterwards? I know Matt has a question.
So have you? I did. Have you? Using Ionic and Electron for both your products, on the mobile side and Electron on.
So we were using Ionic for doing all of our web stuff, or for doing all of our mobile stuff. I'm sorry. I just use Electron just for like fun stuff personally, but we don't have a production application for it yet. Yeah. We will soon.
But you will use it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think like there are very few circumstances where, especially at the beginning, you should not use them. Like even if you're a large team and you have a lot of resources, like you don't want to spend a bunch of your time getting out your beta. like you're going to go, if you aren't going through like 24 iterations in the first like 2 months, you're probably doing something wrong. Like you're just not a good company. And so that's where I think these things are really, really useful because it allows you to iterate on it so much more, so much quicker. And I think that's one of the really important things about it. And again, like everyone has these technologies available to them. Like if you're using, Ionic, for example, you can literally just like send the URL in a text message and someone can open it up like a native app. Like that's all they have to do, which is, I think, really, really convenient. Electron is a little bit more complicated, but not really that much more. You need to like just send them an email, which is cool. So yeah, I would highly encourage, especially if you're like, even if you are a large team, to like create alpha and beta products using these technologies, because they really do help just like make you better. So any other questions? Questions asked out the other? Cool. Any other questions on the phone?
No, not here.
Cool. So I know this URL, the deck and everything is just on the Google thing. So I'm sure you guys are sending it or sent it. Sweet. And that has, I added some notes just on extending a couple of things and some references on some other slides. And I don't think I put my email address, but I can probably give you guys if you need it. Yeah. Or my GitHub. You can also just the GitHub thing. You can GitHub me. GitHub.
Sandbox residents, they can always reach you via Slack.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I am on Slack. Yes. Which was an Electron application. Consistency. Cool. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Life, love, pursuit of happiness? Okay then.
All right.
I think I'm done.
Yeah, I think you are. Thank you everyone for connecting with us. Thank you, Zach, Sheffer, Elson. And we'll be sharing this info and would appreciate your feedback. Hope everyone has a good evening.
Great, thanks. You too.
Thank you, guys.